Rick McQuaid, present.
Tyler Fairbairn here.
Okay, and those on Zoom?
Michael Witherspoon.
Present. Oh, sorry, Michael.
Sorry.
Carl Dickens, present.
Angela Wasuna, present.
Okay. so-
Michael Witherspoon, present.
Yes, we have a full commission here to start the year off. And first of all, I want to wish everybody a happy and healthy and prosperous 2023. Wow. And with that, we have the minutes of the December 21st meeting in front of us. Oh, we have some additional people from the city present. Can we get that in the record as well? I thought I saw some people on Zoom.
This is Henry Dakowitz. I'm the city's chief financial officer.
Thank you, Henry.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Steve Mendick here.
Okay. And I know that both Tom Livingston and is not able to join us tonight because he has another council meeting.
And
So-
the president as well has another meeting as well.
Okay, Greg Bennett.
Yeah, I spoke to Greg
All right.
today.
Yes, thank you. The minutes are in front of us from the December 21st meeting. So, a motion to move the minutes is in order. Would one of the members please make a motion?
Make a motion to accept the minutes.
Okay, and again, because of the Zoom, would you identify yourself?
Anita Brawley.
Thank you, Bernina. Is there a second?
Angela Wasuna, I second.
Angela, thank you so much. Are there any other comments? Corrections? Hearing none and seeing no hands raised, all those in favor as the minutes presented?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The minutes passed unanimously. So moving on, we're beginning tonight's meeting with a second pass at the operating and capital budget section of our charter. So at this point, Steve, Council, would you like to guide us through this?
Happy to do so. Jordan, do you have the most recent version, or do you want to give me the share screen?
I have handed out the most recent version, but if share screen works better, then we can do share screen. Absolutely.
I think it might, because we just are receiving.
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
that's what I thought. So do you want me to share? You want me to share?
Yes, please.
All right, let me make sure I can get it up. Get this thing, the right one on the board here. Article 10, here it is. Okay, can everybody see it?
Well,
I can.
yeah, yes.
The funny thing is I can't, but I have the real thing right here in front of me. So I'm assuming if I move, I'm going to move it and tell me that I'm moving it. You
Okay.
see it moving?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right. Henry Dakowitz is here as well. Henry, nice to see you. Henry's been very, very helpful to me throughout this process. And I'm very grateful to have a CFO who is that interested in working on the constitutional document that will govern him and help him and guide him if this is adopted next November for future budgets. So let's go through it. This is a result of discussions I've had with Henry. The other person I spent a fair amount of time with on this is Tom Livingston, the former council president. And then you'll also see a number of changes that I made based on our discussions last week. I also have started, as I explained briefly in our in the pre-meeting, so it was not on the record, I'll put on the record that I am very mindful of the need to simplify language and to make the language more direct and readable for the public, because this document is as much, if not more, for the members of the public than it is for the people who are operating under it. And I just want to say, as a former elected official who worked with charters, I would much prefer to have a document that is even understandable to me as an elected official in those days, because we were dealing in the 1980s with documents that were created at the turn of the 20th century. And so you'll notice the word said has been taken out a lot, unless there's a he said, she said provision, but I don't think we have any here. But it's been taken out, and I'm going to try as we go through and get this document closer to its conclusion to have an Article 10 that is very readable to everybody. And so the changes in 10-1 are pretty self-explanatory. I think most of them were responsive to our meeting last week. We added the Planning and Zoning Commission. That was a great catch. I believe it was the chair. I don't want to take credit from anybody else. I think it was the chair who raised that issue. So we placed them in there as one of the major players in the process. But that cooperation clause, just to explain it again, is for everybody. It's for employees, but principally the major entities that play a role in the development of the budget are called out specifically. And so those changes are reflected in 10-1A. Minor changes in and here I'm just referring to the budget because it's everything. It's this governs the overall operation of the entire budget process. And in paragraph 2, I added language that Henry had specifically asked for, that the processes and practices that we use should be commonly accepted practices. Those are well known to people like Henry and organizations like the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, and other groups that are involved in that business. We want to make sure that there is a constitutional standard that holds our officials to that level and to an aspiration to employ best practices, whatever that may mean based on those organizations. But I think that the original language was a little very restrictive, and I think it would have been almost impossible to enforce a best practice standard. And I think Henry deserves credit for pointing that out for the record. No changes.
Before you go on,
Yes.
Steve, last meeting, I brought up the issue of making it clear operating versus capital budget. And I wonder if here in the first paragraph, the last sentence, where we just say the budget, we put both capital operating and capital. And then as we go through it, then it's obvious that there are two sections that are addressed. With that, it would be a better read for me. I don't know what.
I'm looking at 10-1, sub A, sub 1.
Yeah, I'm still at the A. I'm still on A. Okay.
Well, the budget shall include all expected revenues and expenditures. That's an operating budget. That's not a capital budget by definition. So maybe we should clarify.
Yeah. It's
But
confusing.
it also, but you see, I think here, and Steve, I'll let you speak to it. I think in this 10-1, we were looking at the budget as encompassing both.
Yeah.
If you look at number 1 that I was referring to, it shall include all expected revenues and expenditures and capital expenses and operating expenses.
Right.
So I don't know. I'll let Steve address it.
Well, we have capital expenses later on in there, in that same paragraph. This is meant to be inclusive, to talk about the gross budget that includes both. I'm happy to expand it to make sure that all the elements, or what I can say, and this might be helpful to the chair, is that we should state that there is an operating budget and a capital budget.
Yeah.
I will sit down with Henry and work on one where we can break down and define what the broad elements are of both of those budgets. And then when we get into the operating budget, we're dealing only with the operating budget. And when we're dealing with the capital, we're only dealing with the capital. But maybe in A1, we should define that there are two important parts of the budget. One
Right,
is the
that
operating
would
budget,
be,
and the other is
yeah.
the capital budget. I think
That's what
goes
I've
to your
been aiming
concern.
for. Yeah, I think
goes to
that
your
will
concern.
clarify it. Yeah.
All right.
Because they both have different schedules and obviously constraints and requirements. So
Absolutely.
I think that will work.
Okay, I'm happy to do that.
Okay,
Further
great.
Clarification.
Does it make sense to you, Henry?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Okay,
Steve and I spent a fair enough amount of time clarifying just the operating budget and then clarifying just the
Mhm.
capital.
yeah,
So referring to both up front is very logical.
okay, great.
And what we may end up doing is, for example, in the capital budget, we're going to move that into the broad definitions. We probably should have in the definitions what the operating budget is, but this will be a summary of what the two of them are, right in this section A1.
Okay,
All right, and I may alter it. I may take it out of the, maybe create its own paragraph. I'll figure it out, but I know what I need to do to make that work.
okay, great.
Um,
Thanks.
Yeah. And
Anybody,
then-
any other comments there on that? Okay, I see none, so let's go forward.
And you'll see in C, I do break it down, is that the budget documents are comprised of the proposed general or operating budget and the capital budget. So I
Right.
do address it somewhat here, but we'll make sure that that is even more clear than it is here. And that these documents and all other information are available in the office of the city clerk and other designated public facilities, including libraries and schools, as may be determined by the mayor or the common council. Physical copies, there's some language that was requested by Tom Livingston, are made available within 72 hours of submission, subject to reasonable charge. As permitted by law under FOI, you're entitled to charge for copies of public documents, and that's all that indicates.
Okay,
Well,
so, Steve, I
yeah.
want to ask, the word schools, is that typical in everybody's, all the other cities' charters?
Some do, some don't. The reason for the schools is if there are places where you can post something that's a public place where people go, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that?
Mhm.
I mean, it's more of a burden, but shall be available. It's up to you. If you think it's
I
too
know,
much
I
of a
just
burden.
wanted to clarify and discuss it so everybody
Yeah.
focused on that concept, because I think, well, we have 18 schools. We used to have 18 schools. Huh? We have something like that now. 18, right? Yeah, yeah. So,
But the schools are a place where members of the public in your community
yeah.
assemble. There's probably more people going to schools than the public libraries
Oh, yes.
when it comes right down to it. So, and that was the reason for that. So
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
let's keep that in mind, because if people think that's too burdensome, we could always eliminate it.
I don't think it's burdensome. I just thought it was interesting and wanted us to
Yeah.
discuss it.
I always try out new things. I'm hoping the people of Norwalk are, as willing to jump into the deep end as I am on these things. So,
I think it's more of an issue of convenience, right? I mean, there are probably more schools accessible than there are libraries. So I think keeping it there makes every sense to me.
Good,
okay, good.
great.
Super.
Thanks for the comment.
And I cleaned up the language regarding access and simply use the term electronic access and don't delineate all the other elements of what that means. We'll leave it up to the people who are going to be distributing information, and the council can always adopt an ordinance that gets further mandates what that means.
Yeah.
So I thought rather than lay it out here where we can't change it except through a charter revision, let's lay out the concept of electronic access, and that could be done either through policy by the mayor or by law through an ordinance by the.
So in that section, it says that the council may enact ordinances, not shall.
No, because we don't want to, if they. Let me see where that is. Hold on.
That's the last sentence. In two, under public.
Oh,
meeting.
under two, I ain't gotten there. Yes, to implement these provisions of the charter. They may not, they may, if they choose to. They won't, they don't have to, but they may choose to if they need to clarify further. That's why I put it in as may. We can say the council has the authority to enact.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Okay,
That's clearer. Okay, we're on D now.
Yeah. Give me a second whenever I get something from you, I want to write it down on my markup version because I don't want to mess around with I don't like marking up a red line. And so I just want to make sure I got it. So I got it. So did everybody look at 2? Is everybody okay with 2? Again, I added planning and zoning. We talked about developing and publicizing procedures.
On D though, under budget calendar.
Is everybody okay with 2 before we go to D?
Oh, okay.
Two's fine.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, that's all I want to make sure. Now D is fine.
Okay, so it was Henry that suggested October, that we change it to October, I believe.
I believe so, Henry.
Is that right,
Oh,
Henry?
absolutely. The budget, remember, we're working on a fiscal year of July through June. So in October, we start the process by developing a calendar. And then later in October, we send out the pro formas. It's not a calendar year, it's a budgetary fiscal year.
And what is it currently, Henry? Is it October now or was it November?
January.
January. So
No,
you're,
Well, I'm not going to comment on the charter. I'll tell you that we've been doing it in October for the last.
okay, okay. That's
He's
good to
right
know.
that administratively, what Henry is trying to do, and I think it makes great sense, and I've never done this in a charter before, but it makes enormous sense, is people need to understand that the budget process is almost a year-long process.
Oh.
It's a 9-month, at least a 9-month process for people like Henry,
Yeah.
and the department folks.
Yeah.
That while they're out there doing their day-to-day job, they're also preparing their budget. This
And-
makes it very clear that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, people really forget, but we basically finalize the numbers, most of the numbers, when we submit them to the council or to the BET for, minor changes, change the cap or change line items. But we're making projections of revenue and expense 6 to 18 months in advance.
Mhm. Yeah.
And anybody who's done projections know, as you add time, the reliability of those projections start going down. So if the process could be shortened, I think you get better data. But the reason I see this taking so long is primarily because so many different entities have to have their say, whether it's the departments, the budget department, the mayor, the council, the BET, the planning and zoning, public participation, and you need time.
Yeah.
You need time for those. So that's why it's taking 8 months.
Well, it's good to know that that's the practice we currently have. I wasn't aware of that and I thought we were making a change. So I just wanted to get educated on that.
Okay?
Thank you.
So we're basically reverse engineering. We're trying to make the charter look like the real process. As
Right.
opposed, yeah.
Right.
Whereas the charter historically has just been about the public deliberations. This shows the public that there is
Process.
a non-deliberative part of the process that's internally deliberative, but not publicly deliberative.
And that's, I think, crucially important to
Yeah,
the
I
public.
agree. No, I was very grateful that Henry raised that. I think it's something I'll try to use in other communities as well.
Okay.
You'll see that I have 1, 2, 3. It's not just because I'm learning how to count. That is going to be left blank until we're done, because I don't, until we're finished, I kind of know what the elements are going to be, but until I'm finished, I'll then throw the elements of the budget process into the calendar. So the calendar will show when the annual budget estimates come in, which is the next item. It'll show when it goes to the BET, when it goes to the council, when it goes back to the BET. So those elements will be the 1, 2, 3 will be fully spelled out in that section. I just wanted to remind you that's what I was doing. All right. And let me make, before the chair comes after me on this, I'm going to make it clear that the annual budget estimates will say annual operating budget estimate. And 10-2 will say annual operating budget estimates. Again, it will be, I may change those titles, and
Yeah.
A will be authority to require operating budget estimates. So
Perfect.
I will make sure that term is put in there, so it's cleaned up all the way through.
Thank you.
And also in B, I meant to take, you'll see operating fund is there.
Mhm.
General fund should come out. We're just going to call it the operating budget. So I'll fix all that as we go through.
Back up to A, in the third line. It says including the Board of Education and the public schools. Is that typical to to enunciate the schools?
Well,
Separate?
somebody brought it up. I did not have in there. It was brought up at the last meeting. I thought somebody on the commission wanted to specify the public schools. I've never done that before, but I'm sure it came out of one of these meetings where somebody.
I
raised
would
this.
explain that there is a distinction between the public schools and its administration run by the superintendent and the Board of Education that supervises them.
Right.
So at times we use the terms interchangeably and it doesn't matter. But in this case, wanted to make sure that both entities are represented here.
So then should public schools be capitalized?
I think so.
All right.
I mean, the reality that the public schools don't give us any information until their Board of Ed approves it. And that's why they're so late in the process.
But is it the public schools or is it the Department of Education? Is it?
I've never heard the term Department of Education.
Okay,
We've never used that.
They never use that. Okay, so
No.
public schools.
So it's NPS, the public schools, which report to the Board of Education.
Okay,
So in my feeling, the problem is that I start getting information from each of the departments early. And then they put them into a computer database that we have. And then we just finished in December meetings with each of the departments that submit requests for expenditures, including those that get grants. So we have individual meetings to refine our understanding of what they're requesting. The Board of Ed tends not to give us their numbers. They have the numbers in December, but until it's blessed by their Board of Ed, they don't release them to us. And that generally does not happen until January. You'll see that as we get into the calendar.
all right. So is that the right term, public schools, or is it the administration of the Board of Education that you're referring to?
We always call it Norwalk Public Schools.
Okay, all right.
what I'm going to recommend is after this iteration, if Henry doesn't mind, I will ask Henry or the mayor's office to send this draft over to the superintendent and other parties at the whatever they're called, the public schools, or the administration, the Board of Education, to have them take a look at it. I don't want them to come in 4 months from now and say they don't like this. So I think I want to get this run by them between now and our next meeting, if that makes sense, Madam Chair.
Yes, are we going to be meeting with them separately also,
Well, we could.
somewhere down the line?
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, but anyway, if we right now capitalize it, it'll, I think, bring
I
our
would have
attention.
this capital Norwalk Public Schools as.
Excellent.
Board of It, yeah, yeah,
And I do think it's important to make a distinction between that and the board.
okay,
I feel like you could get a little more obfuscation from the Board of Education versus Norwalk Public Schools as a
Right.
funded
Okay.
department of the city.
All
okay,
right.
yeah,
Excellent.
that's good, okay, good. I
Norwalk
think
Public
it's
Schools.
progress,
Excellent.
and obviously, public schools is going to be capitalized.
Got it.
Okay,
Got
all
it.
right, so now we're on B, are we?
1 second, just making those changes. B, again, I will take out the word general fund and make sure it's just the operating fund department, the operating budget department estimates. And the date, again, we
I
talked about
think,
that.
Steve,
Yeah,
leave the words general fund. This is our general fund operating budget. We have
Right.
other funds, some of which get incorporated in the operating budget, but in general, it's the general fund of the city.
all right. Very good.
Thank you.
I'll have that taken care of. And going to the next page on B, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here. I changed required to requested. Required is awfully strong language. No one can require anything. They can request things. And it's up to the mayor the BET, and to some extent, the council decide whether those requests will be approved or
Where
part
are
of.
you? You lost me.
Okay, yeah, me too.
All right, in B,
Which,
when you,
You're
yeah,
in B?
yeah,
Can
well, that's
you
what you
be-
asked. Yep,
N2B.
that, where I just made the change with, to keep the general fund in there.
Yeah.
Second page.
Okay,
You just continue in there. We took out taxing district. We put the public schools, the Norwalk Public Schools. We have the date of January 15th. This is for the submission of the department estimates.
December
then-
15th,
What?
December 15th.
I'm sorry, December
number
15th.
15.
I was looking at the crossed out January saying January, December 15th. And then on the next page, you'll see the amount of money requested by said, and I didn't take out the word said there.
It's not the next page on, I don't know, maybe it's just my printout. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's on the next page. If everybody's following on the screen,
What number?
What number or letter?
it's under letter B.
It's the same.
Before you get to
Okay.
one, you'll
N2B.
see the word, see where my marker is? There?
No.
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
You see it?
yeah, so just before one.
It's over one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's requested, not required. That change has been made. I think that was one of Henry's requests. Item one is relatively new. Henry and I, during our discussions, I came up with, I was actually going to put this in another, actually, if you look at two, you'll see that I had personnel and monetary requirements. Henry thought there should be a more robust description. And we talked about an inventory of payroll, personnel payroll rosters for all departments, including filled positions, approved vacancies, and newly requested positions, the number, title, or function. Looks like there's an extra semicolon in there, and the rest, and other actual or projected expenditures pertaining to each employee.
I'm sorry, this is Benita, and I have no idea where you are right
that's,
now.
well, I'm glad you jumped in on that because,
What's on the screen? Do you see the screen?
Well, it's 10 dash.
what I think part of the problem is some of us are trying to use our printout and they're not the same. So maybe we just have to look at the screen.
Okay,
Steve, can I make a suggestion?
Yes, Henry.
Yes,
On
please.
your shared document, go to view and blow it up to 200 or 250%. Some of us are over the age of 20 and we have a hard time seeing small font.
Yeah, are you?
you can make it bigger by,
Yeah, she was working off of her paper copy.
Is that better?
Yes,
A little bit.
yeah.
Is that better?
What,
Much.
a little smaller because it's not all on the screen.
you
Part of
know,
it.
your fingers.
Yeah,
Yeah, just-
Better on the screen, much better.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so
Okay.
we're at what number now?
One inventory of.
Okay,
Let me explain the significance of this. First of all, let me go back to the word requested.
yep,
It wasn't Steve's legal definition that concerned me. It's the process. We send out what's called a pro forma, our best guesstimate of what we think the number should be. The departments then react and request a budget. Then it goes through the whole process where the mayor and I review it and we come out with our recommendations. Then it goes to the council, then it goes to the BET. So for me, request is the beginning of the
Right.
process.
yeah,
The word required implied that the department heads have the power to say, oh, this is what we need, just give it to us. So that's why I changed to requested.
I think that sounds great.
Okay, now on sub one, as you can imagine, payroll costs are 70 to 80% of the budget of each side, the city and the Board of Ed. We've had a very tough time historically keeping track of all headcount. Okay, in computers, human resource modules, there's something called position control numbers. And the Board of Ed used it one way, we used it another way. I don't want to get into the weeds, but we made a very big push, and at the end of last year's budget, we reconciled all of our records with what was in the budget. every person in that budget is either on payroll, and we knew what they were getting paid by the controller. And so we could calculate for the next year what their increases would be. Or it was a vacancy. The vacancy with a title, with a union, with a rate of pay was in the budget. And we carried that forward when we started the budget this year in October. However, I'm sure you'll be all shocked to learn that we weren't reconciled anymore. People had different numbers, and there's a process that has to be gone through to add a position, not an individual filling a vacancy, but to say, instead of having 4 police officers, I want 5. And that process is to go through the budget process, get formal approval by all these bodies, and then it's a formal vacancy. Once it's approved and it's a vacancy, Human Resources is supposed to issue a personnel action report. We call those PAR. And now they have to send a copy of that PAR to the controller to make sure the vacancy will get paid properly, to the budget department to make sure it agrees with our budget, and to the individual department so that they know they have a new vacancy. This wasn't being done in the past. So this section is very important to me because that's how we control 80% of our budget. And by putting it into the charter that we are going to get those 3 categories: existing people, vacancies, and then as we sit with the departments, they say, we need another person with this title. And we have those 3 categories enumerated by position, by title, by estimated cost. We control it during the budget cycle. If they get approved, it goes through HR. And then we want to make sure we just don't lose control as we have in the past. So that's why we emphasize that here.
Okay, Henry, how do you identify when a position is approved but not filled during that fiscal year?
At the end of the budget cycle,
Mhm.
after the operating budget is approved. So remember, the mayor and I come out with a recommendation. It goes to the council to set a cap. It goes to the BET to change line items. They can move money from one line to another as long as they stay within the cap. If they go above the cap, it goes back to the council. They can either approve it, I believe, with a 2/3 vote, or they reject it. If they reject it, it goes back to the BET and says, live within our cap. Within that cap, the budget enumerates all the personnel positions. In addition to the dollars, we have a roster by name or title, and we have dollars associated with it. So they may say, we know who that vacancy is going to be. Fine, put the name in. They may say this is requested. When it's approved, if it survives that whole process, the list of newly requested positions that has been approved goes to HR. HR then has to complete the personnel action request, and they say this is a newly approved vacancy. It will then go to the controller, the budget department, and the department getting the personnel, and that way we're all on the same wage.
Good. Anybody have any questions? Okay, we can move on.
All right, the other item 2, we just basically capitalized itemization, and the the last clause, personnel and monetary requirements, are really in 1. 3, again, capitalize comparative figures for the items that are there. Capitalize performance measures. Then the next thing we did is we eliminated all this ancient language that's in the current charter regarding Board of Education submissions to BET. Most of these things are controlled by collective bargaining. They're controlled by Title 10 of the general statutes, which gives the Board of Education control over their lines. And while the city, and Henry and I have talked about this, can require the Board of Education to give us all the data that we get from every other department. It's more for informational purposes because we can't ultimately modify their line authority. We can't change their lines. We can only identify them. We have the data to be able to look at it historically to see how much truth there has been in their budgeting, how much variation there's been. So policymakers can, from year to year, ask the Board of Education, well, you said to the public when you adopted your budget X, but you ended up doing X minus minus minus. Why did that happen? We can't alter their lines, but we can certainly try to make sure there's truth in budgeting for all departments, agencies of the city, including the Board of Ed.
Let me
Most of
add
the,
some
yeah.
context, if I might.
Yes.
I'm going to have in this.
I'm sorry, is someone speaking? I don't want to speak over.
No, I don't know what happened. Go ahead, Henry.
Thank you. When I first came here, the budgeting that we did would only show budgeted numbers. So we're now in the process of setting up the budget for fiscal year 24. The documents that I saw would show, here's fiscal year 22 budget. Here's the current year we're in, fiscal year 23 budget. And then there's a blank space for fiscal year 24. And I said, where's the actual? Nobody had it. So one thing I instituted immediately was to look at actual numbers. So we would look at fiscal year 21 actual. Fiscal year 22, when we started the budget, was a projection. Just today, we filed our audited financial statements. So until they're audited, they're a projection by the controller of what the numbers will be. Then we add fiscal year 23, the current budget, and then we say, let's look at the budget. For example, there was a woman who said, why didn't you give me the $50,000 on this line item? I get it every year. And where our answer was, you don't spend it every year. Why should we keep giving it to you? So adding the actuals was very important. Now, one of the frustrations I have had with the Board of Ed is that because there's a minimum budget requirement, they tend to request an increase and explain what that increase will be spent on. They never do what we do, which is look at the prior years. We budgeted X. How much did we actually spend? What was the change? What was the difference? Line item by line item. And the debate becomes, what are we going to do with the extra 10, 20, 30 million, whatever it is that they request? This request that they will give us the information the same way that we demanded of the city will give us some insight. So for example, I believe it was 2.5 years ago, they spent over $100,000 on recruiters and human resource consultants when they were searching for a new superintendent. And I said, you don't need that money the next year. Where did it go? No answer, because they don't present their budget information in that manner. So while Steve said it's informational only, I think it might be very helpful to the mayor, the council, and the BET to see this information and to evaluate the Board of Ed's request.
I underscore that position. Truth in budgeting, I think, is it really will lend itself to that going forward.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay.
The last item is right under the yellow section. You see it, explanation of the effective collective bargaining provisions on personnel expenditures, including salaries, benefits, and overtime. So the budget will need to show that information. I have been putting that in charters. The newly adopted charters in Hartford and Hamden are the first two in the state that have that information. One of the problems I faced as a budget authority, as a legislator in my town, in my city many years ago, was we got all these overtime numbers, and many of us as neophytes assumed that, well, you know, with winter, Public Works will have big numbers and bad winters. That makes sense. Everybody understands that. But when you look at police and fire, you just assume there's more fires to deal with overtime or more crime to deal with overtime. And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of this is driven by provisions of collective bargaining agreements. Again, this information will allow the development of historical information so that people who have to approve collective bargaining agreements, from mayors who have to negotiate collective bargaining agreements, they will understand what the origins of overtime are and whether or not there are things you can do with the collective bargaining agreement to modify how overtime is accrued, to try to make overtime as close to service related as possible. Right now, overtime is contract related. And so the objective is to have a contract that is contoured to the services for the public, as opposed to a contract that is skewed for the compensation of the beneficiaries of the contract.
Let me add a comment based on my experience. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we entered into collective bargaining with all of our unions at one time. And it's done during the budget year. From July to June, the agreements tend to be signed in the spring and they're effective that July 1. For confidentiality and negotiation, we normally, during our budget, we have all the salaries and overtime within each department. So we have an accurate assessment of what each department has as a personnel cost. When we're going into bargaining, we estimate an increase, but we bury it in one of my CFO departments because we don't want to tip our hand as to negotiations. And we're not going to know those numbers until late in the process, April, May. So I agree with Steve that it's important as a city, both the elected officials who are reviewing this and for individual citizens to understand the impact of every contract conclusion. However, the year we enter into those negotiations, those are done in executive session, they're confidential negotiations, and it's not going to be known until the end of the process. So I'm not sure I understand this, Steve. Is this in the year of negotiation or is this every year?
This is every year. And so this allows the mayor and the CFO to go to the negotiating table with historical data so that when you go into those confidential discussions, you have data that shows how overtime is generated. And
Well, it doesn't say overtime. It just says the effective of collective bargaining. Do you mean only overtime?
no, including salaries, benefits, and overtime at the end of the sentence.
Well, but it's so broad. I don't understand how I would prepare this report. There are salaries that have, I don't know, 2.35% increase every year. Do you want to see a 10-year forecast? Do you want to see, how do we allocate benefits? That the health insurance, I can't get a new health insurance program because we have certain benefits that we promise. It's very broad, and I'm not sure how I would prepare something to report.
Well, the narrative that the other communities are looking at is when you get to the overtime lines in a budget, why is it $100,000 a week? Why is it $100,000 a month? And there should be a narrative that explains that these overtime numbers are based on section such and such of the collective bargaining agreement that requires minimum personnel requirements. It requires X number of people in this position, that position, and another position. The idea is to explain that these salaries, the salary increase of 2% is driven by section such and such of a collective bargaining agreement. It's a pretty simple explanation. So that when you get to these portions of your line items, they are explained. There's a narrative that explains why that overtime is there. It's not simply there because we're anticipating a crime wave next July. It's because there's a collective bargaining agreement that drives the overtime number.
Okay,
I have a question on that section. Why do we need to define the expenditures, including salaries, benefits, and overtime? I had been chairman of the negotiating team for the city when I was on the council, so I've had some experience with this process, and some of these terms are very sensitive and can be of concern in presenting and getting this referendum passed. Passed.
You need to, I don't know what that means. You need,
I just don't know why we have to define the personnel expenditures.
or
It's
you want to
period,
cut out
it's all of it.
you just leave it at expenditures, that's fine.
And not have the words including salaries, benefits, and overtime.
I'm okay with that.
And it can be as per the, as per the bargaining agreements, something
We can-
referring to
we
that.
can Cut out the including, because it's,
Yeah.
I have no issue with that.
Yeah, okay. And then when in several meetings, you have mentioned the state statute that says the Board of Education has to give the city all of their expenses. And
It's not a statute, yeah.
Is it a statute?
No, it's
No.
case law.
Okay, can we refer to that in the charter? This is going to be a major discussion, I'm sure, with the Board of Education and the city, if we propose this, because they don't do that now, correct, Henry?
they give me what they want to give me.
Yeah, exactly,
And I
yeah,
would say, it's on the basis of this minimum budget requirement. And it's funny because Tom Hamilton used to say to me, you do our accounting, okay? We use your controller. You have all the numbers there. And I'm not getting into a trap where I have to go searching through numbers to figure out what they spent where and how and why. I just think that if this is mandated, now they, in all fairness, they may already prepare much of this and present it to their Board of Education. Okay, so I'm not sure it's so much of an additional effort because their Board of Ed may ask for that information. And again, it's a lot of information. It's a question of how we use it and whether people refer to it, especially when the minimum budget requirement says you can't cut and you can't specify individual items. But I just feel it might be helpful to us to gain a greater insight into how they're spending the monies we give them.
yeah. I think there will be resistance to that concept, and that's why I thought it might be important to put a tag on it as to, I thought it was a state statute, not a case law.
Yeah, I'll be happy. I gave Henry a memo that lays out the legal rationale for the position.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's been adopted in a number of different places. And while there's resistance, I think they understand that the Supreme Court has been very clear that they are a department of the city and they have to, in all other respects, except for the sections of Title 10 that give them their own powers. We can't hire a superintendent. We can't approve a superintendent's, actually, they call it electing a superintendent. They elect their superintendent. They do the contract negotiation with the superintendent. They approve it. They have authority to do a multi-year agreement. No one else has authority for multi-year agreements, including the mayor, but the Board of Ed does with regard to a school superintendent and with regard to salaries in the collective bargaining agreement as well.
Okay.
And they have and then their budget lines are controlled by them. But in all other respects, they are covered by the administrative requirements of the municipality. So whatever the municipality requests, they're obligated to provide. And I'll share that memo with the commission.
Okay. where are we with my suggestion? Is that a good idea, bad idea?
What's,
To reference,
well, it'll be hard to do a legal memo in the
yeah,
charter.
right,
Mhm.
okay. All right, well, it's good that we're educated to that and
Yeah.
prepared to deal with it, okay?
And maybe the memo might be circulated to the Board of Ed. Steve, you were gonna reach out to maybe the superintendent, the CFO, the head of the Board of Ed, and you can pass that.
We'll have them come before the commission and we'll have that discussion, and the memo is a public document, so I'll be happy to share it with them as well.
Okay, okay, good,
Madam
Right.
Chair, I have a question.
yes.
This is for Henry. Henry, is there a repository somewhere where all collective bargaining agreements for the city are held that delineates what jobs are paid and salary, this sort of thing?
Yes, the Human Resources Department,
Okay,
in coordination with the unions.
and that covers everybody that has a collective bargaining agreement with the city, including the Board of Education. Is that be true?
I don't think they do Board of
The
Education.
Board of Ed may be in their administrative offices.
Has their own Human Resources.
Yeah.
Department.
Well, the only reason I asked the question is that it appears to me that there needs to be, if there's a place you can go find salaries and collective bargaining agreements, that I don't know that anything to the minutia of what those are needs to be in the charter.
A charter that doesn't change except.
Well, in this chart, I mean, I think we were talking about putting,
The location of the information is what you're saying.
correct. But the actual, everything delineated doesn't have to be a part of this. It's just where you can find it.
Well, we're not asking them to, I mean, the line, Henry can correct me if I'm wrong, but in our general in the operating budget,
Right?
there is I haven't looked at yours, either an addendum or part of the presentation. You'll have a breakdown of most salaried positions. And all this provision says is that it'll probably say it in the bottom line, is that when it comes to overtime, these provisions are governed by this section of the collective bargaining agreement. And
Makes
it's up
sense.
to,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
that's all that this does.
As long as it's a pathway to find the information that you need to
Yeah,
find.
that's the objective.
Yeah.
Right
Okay.
now in the budget book.
Yeah.
In essence, to support the salary line of every department.
Right.
The list of the roster, as I mentioned before, which includes everyone currently on payroll and every vacancy which has been approved with a dollar amount and a title. And those numbers have to tie. So it's such a large number of every budget, you can go back and you could know by individual and by title how much they're getting paid.
Sure. Yeah.
And what about the non-union people
Oh, we're listed there too. There
in
are
the same, yeah, but
18
do we
of us,
need to
I think.
reference anything in this article to non-union? Because you're,
Can't be many people that's non-union.
well, there's a list.
No, each department has a list of their whole roster.
Right.
So for example, the senior executives in many departments, but not all, are non-union.
Yeah.
Nor should they be.
And that's really covered by the inventory of payroll rosters and stuff like that.
Right.
Okay, all right, that's what I was questioning, as
Yeah.
long as it was there. Okay,
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
there.
okay, good.
All right.
All right.
Before I go on to C, can you see the footnote number 17 on the
No.
screen?
No, when you blew it
No.
up, it blew it up off the right side.
Yeah, no, yeah.
See it?
Right there, perfect.
Take a look. It says replaces current article 18 entitled schools. So right now in the charter, you call it schools. We don't call it public schools. So it
Right.
might be from there that I picked up the public schools. So I just wanted to
Okay.
point out that it's in your current charter. That's
Oh,
all.
good, that's helpful, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So in C, I will, again, at the chair's request, I'll make sure operating is placed into the document, both in the title and in the third line, just above the 15th day of December on the annual department proposals
That
submission.
should be January.
it should be January.
That's the copy that I have.
Well, it was January, but it was struck.
Strike out
Now it says
December.
December.
Yeah, it's struck out.
Is that January? Because Henry, I had January. I thought you moved it back to December.
No, that was before. I mean, on the copy I have, it doesn't have that change. I have a copy you gave to me with Tom Livingston comments on January 1st. Did it change since then?
Nope. Because mine says,
No. Well, the point is, which month do
which
you
one is
want
it,
it to
Henry?
be?
That's all I want
Yeah,
to know.
yeah.
Submission, each department should either and in all places submit to the CFO a true copy of the proposed annual budget or any. Who's submitting to whom? The departments are submitting to me?
Yeah,
Yes,
That should be December.
okay.
December.
That's what
Okay,
it is.
So that's
okay.
what I
That's
have.
what it says.
It says
That's
December.
what, so it's right.
All right,
Okay,
Okay, good.
good.
Okay.
I thought I had that right. And this, you'll see, this is the deletion at the request of the chair, where I had the submission of estimates of capital budget items. I took it out of here, which was the general section, and you'll see it show up again when we get to capital. So do you see it on the screen?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
All right. Then we have the proposed defined terms. You will see these again this evening. You will see these in Article 1, where I've started to create the definitions, because this is not going to be in this document. This is going to be in Article 1. And I think I made the changes that Henry had requested in here.
Steve, can I make a change now that I'm reading it?
Please be my guest.
Capital budget items. All monies in excess of $5,000
Yeah.
or an increased amount set forth by ordinance. Instead of utilized, I would use the word expended
Okay,
in more than one fiscal year.
got it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody
And-
okay with that? This is not Henry and my show. Everybody all right on the commission?
Yeah, yeah.
And should we discuss the dollar amount? Is it
Let me,
current with 5,000 or should it be bigger?
let me explain my evolution on this.
Okay,
When I first heard this, I thought it was way too low.
yeah,
But what I have found in my 4 years with the city is that when departments want to make a change, not just the standard, I haven't hired my vacancies, so I have to move money from payroll to overtime or to outside services, consultants. But when they're making these other changes, I find that when the threshold is $5,000, half of them go away. Oh, we'll try to make it work some other way. And it's a real good control procedure because the BET sits there and grills them. My favorite friends, they understand finance, they understand the city, and they are independent. So I know there are people who will say it wastes too much time. Let's make it $25, $50, or $100,000. My concern, so I'm in charge of finance, accounting, and controls, financial controls. My concern is if you make this too high, then departments are playing around with the numbers. We have a very exacting, lengthy, detailed budget process. And then, well, if it's 25, 50, or 100,000, we could just shift it around on our own. Now, it might be that the CFO has to approve. And I'm okay saying no, but there are political pressures on me sometimes. And when the BET is reviewing, it's an extra layer of caution. Now, I would admit, I think 5,000 in this day and age, which buys about 3 dozen eggs, is a little low. But I seriously would ask you to consider, and also it can be changed by ordinance.
Yeah.
The point is, I like having a charter that lays this out, and then if the council in its wisdom says we're gonna make an ordinance and we're gonna say 50,000 is the right number, fine. But then that can be changed again down the road. It gives you the flexibility, and this is just sort of a mark in the sand, I think.
okay, but here we're talking about capital. Your example was operating. So you feel that way about capital as well as operating?
Let Well, a capital budget, no, this is our definition of what a capital budget item is. What's in the capital budget versus an operating budget?
But
let
we're
me
talking
try-
about $5,000 limit
try to
for a
finish.
capital project, right?
Well, but the point is, this is following and emulating accounting rules. Okay? It should be anything that's more than 1 year usage. Okay? Now, if I have a laptop that's $2,000, people would say, it's $2,000. Why are you putting it into the capital budget? Put it into your operating budget. And even if we had 20 of those laptops that we're buying for a total of 40,000, it would be put into the annual operating budget. And that's what we do now, because every year we have to refresh a number of laptops. But anything, the key is that it's over 1 year. If it's something that has value for more than 1 year, whether it's a sewer system that has a 70-year life, a school that has a 50-year life, or some other machinery or equipment. A good example would be an apparatus for the fire department, which is over $1 million, and it's 15 years. That should be part of the capital budget. Okay? And you don't want to go the other way. When I was in Nassau County, they put the hubcaps for the police cars in the capital budget, because that was a way to hide it. So you want to have operating budget items which are below $5,000, more than 1 year. And if it's more than 1 year and 5,000 or more, then it should be capital. I apologize. I was talking about something else.
Yeah.
Special
thought you
budget
were.
transfer, my mistake.
Okay, so for a capital, is 5,000 realistic in this day and age, or should we change it?
As an accountant, I would say it would be $1 or more for more than 1 year. That's what a capital asset is. This is more of a convenience that says de minimis. So I'm willing to go up to 5,000, but I think anything more than that should be capital budget. Remember, we have $175 million of capital projects that have been approved that we've never borrowed money for. There's a lot of stuff that's approved sitting around, but it goes through a capital process. And the reality is that should be checked carefully. So yes, I think 5,000 is the appropriate number.
Any other comments?
Can I ask? a
I,
question?
only that, I would agree with Henry. I think he went from A to Z back to B and to A to B, and that made perfect sense. So maybe it's wrong to me, but no, I think it was fine. I agree with that. And it can be changed, as you can see right under that, by if there's a major thing to go over 5, you would be involved, and so would city council, and an ordinance to be made.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're permanently locked in. They can make the change.
Yeah, I would even add, Carl, let's say we have inflation and all the numbers keep going up and we agree to say $10,000. That's fine. We do it in an ordinance, but it's based on current circumstances that change
Right.
rather than the charter that we do every 50 or 75 years.
But here it doesn't reference doing it with an ordinance.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
Where?
Right underneath it, it does.
amount.
Right in the
Yeah.
parenthetical,
Uh,
right here.
Yeah, right here.
See it?
Okay, yep, okay, thanks. All right, and you had a question?
Yeah, this is Benita. I have a question about the defined term capital budget. The use of the capital budget referred to in this charter is defined as the specific portion of the capital projects program. What is the capital projects program for those of us?
The distinction is that when we do a capital budget, we do a 5-year rolling forecast. And the mayor especially says capital projects should not be done on a whim at the last second. We should be planning for it years in advance. So, for example, the police department needed something like $14 million to update their radio systems. And the explanation they gave me is we're going from analog to digital. And they had it 5 years out, 4 years out, 3 years out, 2 years out. And a year ago, that was the year that it came due. So we had to agree to it. So when we say capital budget, the capital budget would be the first year of that 5-year program, if you would. capital projects program.
Okay. Can that be defined in writing?
Well, we should probably clarify it right here.
Right,
The
yeah,
capital
and
budget referred to as defined as the specific word, and I would say the first year.
Well, no. We have to be very careful there.
Then tell me.
As I said, I think historically, we would approve a capital budget and then we would borrow the money and spend the money in 1 year. That's not what we do today.
No.
There are IRS rules, which I believe came into account in 1987, which says anyone who borrows money tax-free is not allowed to spend too much or to spend it over a longer period. So if we have a bridge, it takes 2 years to build and 100 million. We're not allowed to borrow 150 million for 4 years. The IRS is trying to prevent us from over borrowing tax-free and then using the money we don't spend to buy treasury bonds and make what's called an arbitrage profit. Consequently, I'm trying always, I go between two extremes. On one extreme is, it's been drilled into my head by people from Parks and Rec and Public Works. We have a short summer season to do all of our construction, especially the schools. So when they do construction, I want to make sure I have enough bond money available, bond proceeds, so that they can give out the work with purchase orders. They give me the invoices and we have enough bond money to pay. On the other hand, I don't want to have too much money where the IRS says you borrowed too much, you didn't spend it down quickly enough, and we're going to declare your bonds taxable. So what we do now is every quarter, we go out to all the department heads who have capital projects. And we just say, give us a forecast, a rolling 2-year forecast. We do it in 8 quarters. And we say, what do you expect to spend? And what do you expect to get reimbursed? Because especially with the school programs, there's a very intricate calculation. We may spend the money in January. Some of it we may get reimbursed in March, but they withhold 11% till the end of the project, which could be 5 years, 6 years down the road. So we look at what's the net cash flow we're looking at for the next 12 months. I then look at what is the unexpended bond proceeds we still have available, and I determine how much we borrow. And that's why last year we borrowed 82 million, even though the capital budget was 39 million. We started eating into the 175 million overhang I talked about, used to be 225 million. So we borrow based on cash flow. So let me go back to the definition. Capital budget refers to, in this chapter, is defined as the specific portion of the capital projects program for which it is proposed to make expenditures during, and I would change that to, instead of the specific portion, it would be the first year of the 5-year capital projects program, which can then be, when we approve the projects, we can spend the money 3 years from now. Okay, people tee it up. There are only so many buildings that our building department can do at one time. So that's why they stack them up. They get the approvals in advance. And then so the spending is not specifically during the year for which the budget got approved. But I believe the way we use the term capital budget, it's the first year of that 5-year capital project program.
Got it.
And when you say 5 years, you're not talking to the 5-year projected, not to get it confused here.
Yes, yes. So
You are?
when each department submits their capital budget, there are 5 columns. So operating this year is just going to be 24. We'll have 5 columns, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And sometimes they say this is a multi-year project. We need 500,000 the first year or 100,000 the first year for design. Then the next year we need 500,000 and then 1 million and then it tails off. So there's a 5-year program that they're requesting. Now I focus on that first year because that's the approval and that adds to what I'm carrying to look at what's my total that I have to borrow. The other 4 years are for information. Sometimes they'll have a project listed with nothing requested for fiscal year 24, but they say it's coming and we want to show you what it is in the out years. So I would call the 5-year the capital budget program. Okay, capital project program. And
So-
that first year
Yeah.
is the capital budget for the current year.
So why don't we do this? Go down to the bottom. Do you see on the screen now?
Yeah,
Right.
5-year
Mhm.
program. Why don't we simply call it the 5-year capital projects program?
Yes.
Great.
Does that make sense?
yes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That way we align all the definitions. Got it. All right. And I was gonna take you down to that. Are we okay now? I'll take you down to that line. Henry, are we okay with that definition? You and I worked on this.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I could see where, reading it fresh again.
Yep.
It's a little too vague. And we can be very specific here, the first year out of that 5-year program, and everybody gets it.
All right, then why don't you and I look at these two definitions again, if that's okay, rather than try to lay it out right now.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
But Henry, when you do that, consider this issue of when you're going out for a big project and you have to verify that all of the funds have been approved by the city, but you are going to expense them over 4 years. I'm not going to use 5 because it's confusing. Say expense over 4 years. So your A&E, for instance, is going to obviously be in the first year. And then the building project would be spread out over the next 3 years. I don't want that concept confused with the 5-year programs for planned. The 5-year program in some instances has been sort of a wish list for the city that this is what the department wants to do. And not the exact monies that are needed to do the project itself.
Patsy, there are 3 components and you left one out.
Okay,
The first is the approval of the capital project. The last is the expenditure for the actual project. In the middle is borrowing. And this budget document doesn't talk about the borrowing.
yeah,
So the point
Okay.
is, I've decoupled the approval of the projects from when we borrow money. That's what the finance department should do. Make sure you have enough money, but make sure your bonds are not running afoul of the IRS rules. But there's no reason to clutter this in here. The project and the 5-year program are, you're right. I won't say wish list because when I do, I get into trouble.
yeah,
The
but
point is- and
come up
that's
with a
why I
better
use the
word.
We changed required to requested.
yeah,
So they're requested, but the point is if it runs through the gauntlet and gets approved, it's now in the approved list. And I have no control. My nightmare is everybody rushes to spend that money for the projects at the same time, and I didn't borrow enough money. And realistically, when they're spending money, especially on big projects like that, they have to work with our procurement and purchasing department. They have to do an RFP. The problem we're running into now, and we're starting to see it in a serious way when we do the budget, is that departments have gotten RFPs for operating expenses as well as for capital. And now we're coming back, they open up the bids, and the bids are all higher than what we budgeted
right.
because of inflation. So there are a lot of moving parts. I think if we keep this document to just the capital budget and its approval, and down the road, they will spend the money eventually and leave the bonding out of it.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Everybody agreed? Move on?
I would agree.
Okay, move on.
Again, this is going to be called the operating budget. So we'll address that.
General fund is going to be changed to operating.
Yeah. No real changes here. I did put that this is the mayor's proposed budget at this point. And the dates have not changed. The term criticisms and recommend in A, 10-3A. I had Tom Livingston raised the question, what on earth is that? And I pointed out that is in the charter. That's what it's called. So the mayor's office is looking at that. I'm sure they'll talk to Henry and we'll figure out, is there a better term to use than criticisms and recommendations? Because when the mayor's making a budget, he's not criticizing and recommending. He's going to be, well, he'll be recommending. He'll be laying out, said, this is what we're proposing to the BET.
Reviewing might be a word.
Yeah, it might just be recommendations, but it's
Yeah.
criticisms and recommendations.
But, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the terminology that they were.
Well, I think it's important that it's clear that he has the power to really review it, you know?
Well, he's proposing it, so he
Yeah.
can make the changes he needs to make before it
Okay.
goes to the BET. That's the intent.
Yeah, and Henry, you had wanted it changed that it went to the mayor's budget rather
No,
than. Yeah.
no, actually, the mayor's office wanted that. Right now, it's a joint CFO and mayor recommendation.
Yeah,
In all fairness,
yeah,
what the mayor wants is what he gets. So changing it to the mayor's recommended budget
mhm,
is just probably more accurate. I'm his employee, I advise him, but it's his recommendation. The strange thing is, in the first or second week of February, I currently make 3 presentations to the Board of Estimate on Monday, the council on Tuesday, and then the Finance Committee on Thursday of this operating budget. So it's a joint budget, so having me present makes sense. Maybe the mayor will designate that I can present his budget in the future, but
okay,
I really think it is more appropriate to have it called the mayor's recommended operating budget.
okay. Okay, any comments, anybody? Okay,
That constructive criticism. No, I'm just kidding.
It makes sense, Henry.
Okay.
And then we get to the department estimates. The big change here is we eliminated the taxing districts. And we changed old-fashioned language, tax on the polls and rateable estate to mill rate. That's what it's called. And so we wanted to use language that everybody understood, and we could kind of define that the assessed value of a property, the sum of which is referred to as the grand list. So it really uses modern language to describe what is in the current charter.
is it clear how the mill rate is established?
Well, that's statutory, so we don't need to lay that out in the charter.
Yeah, because I think, as we found out last time, it's not just property value, it's also services rendered.
Well, there.
I'm not getting into that debate.
Layer upon layer. So first of all, it's not just real estate. It's also vehicles and business personal property. And then secondly, the mill rates by district. So we could do an average for the city. Here's the grand list of real estate, business personal property, and vehicles. And they're all getting the same mill rate. And we say, we divide through and we say, here's the mill rate. But then when you get down to the mill rate by taxing district, we do some calculations. We isolate the services that are not shared by all districts, and we allocate those expenditures just to the districts that get those services. And that's why the first, second, and third have identical mill rates. The fourth, fifth, and sixth do not. And then we go from there. We multiply by the average home value or assessed value, I guess, for each of those districts times that mill rate, and we get the average tax bill for the district. So it's a bit complicated. The fact that we don't have to go into it in the charter makes me happy.
I I just question the wisdom of taking out any explanation on the taxing district. Because a taxpayer in one district is paying a different mill rate than the others. And they don't understand why.
Where was that in the old, or did you already take that out, Steve?
It's right here. If you
It's
look at it,
here.
the deletion is shown right here.
In B,
Mhm.
right?
In letter B?
I think.
Because the department, because the
National tax.
taxing districts don't send you estimates, do they?
That's why we took that
Yeah.
part out.
Right,
They create their own budget.
right.
Well,
Send us.
the sixth district gives us a rate, and we are the collection agent. So we
That's it.
put it on our tax bills. And literally, I say, what rate do you wish? And last year it was, oh, we can keep it the same. And this year they do their calculations based on their expenses. Because remember, the sixth district, we're carving out services that the city provides other districts, so they don't pay for those. But after they get their sixth district tax, it's probably higher. But that's a.
But that's not part of your estimate process. You get the end result and you apply it to the mill rate for the people who live in that
Right,
district.
so in essence, the mill rates that we calculate that go in the budget book should agree with the tax bills that every district gets. And in the budget book, we do explain where we're taking out waste collection, we're taking out lighting, and we're taking out fire department services. And it's not easy for us to isolate those expenses and the allocation, we can take the numbers and allocate it over whatever districts are getting those services. But tracking down accurately what those costs are is non-trivial.
Is what, Henry? None?
Non-trivial. It's not like the number is just sitting there.
No, yeah,
Trivial.
okay, no. But the Department of Public Works certainly knows what it costs to do waste collection.
Well, actually,
They don't?
different contracts with city carding.
Yeah,
And I was instructed in the past, it's only this one contract, not these other two, because
okay,
the other two were done citywide. The fire department,
yeah. The
And that's the
Roeton has
cost-
gone.
the cost of running a fire department, but it's also the contribution to their fire department pension. And it's also an allocation of some of the other personnel benefits. So it's, and then I just did this today, for the lighting, we had to go to Eversource. They have 72 accounts for street lighting.
Yeah.
And we're gonna get that isolated and look at what those numbers are. So we're trying to do what's accurate and fair.
But you need to know what the Department of Public Works would expect to expend on waste collection.
Well, that's what I said. There's
Yeah.
a collection firm, but we have 3 different contracts with them.
Yeah,
It's important that we identify the actual expenses
Yeah.
of those contracts, pick the right one, and then we have to say, what's the cost gonna be next year? Because we're doing next year's budget.
yeah, that's where the estimate comes in, but if we take it, the term of the several taxing districts out, then you're not asking for that to be broken down. But you need it.
Well, we get that. These are our people who have the numbers. the
Yeah,
control-
I'm just, trying to have citizens of Norwalk have the basic explanation of why one mill rate is different in one district than the other.
Absolutely right. Because
Yeah.
right now they don't have a clue.
Yeah, and because nobody understands it. And it is a bone of contention with a lot of taxpayers. And it's so hard to explain, but I don't think we should ignore the difficulty of making it clear because it's too difficult. We need to tackle it somehow and come up with something that makes sense.
Did we,
I mean, but a general high level description in 1 or 2 sentences is very easy. It says individual districts may have different mill rates because they are all not receiving the same
Same
identical
services.
services from the city.
Mm.
And the details can be in the budget book and how we do the calculations, and they're there every year. But it says it. They may not want to believe it and understand it, but then they should go to their taxing district and find out what's being done.
So I move into the city. You knew this is Carl Dickens for the record, but I mean, I don't know if it matters or not. I move into the city. Where would I find out what district I'm moving into, taxing district, and what the mill rate is in that taxing district? I might want to go somewhere where the taxes are lower, but I wouldn't have a clue where.
Well, in our budget book, we lay out the whole calculation, citywide, what the average mill rate is, and then individual tax districts, we show the deductions for these expenditures, which are allocated to certain districts. The problem, Carl, is that you may have a lower mill rate, but the average home in that area is much higher. So, you know, someone who's moving to the city could be pointed to that. We're happy to discuss this and explain to them, and they should talk to the individual tax districts.
And the provisions on the taxing districts are going to remain in the back of the charter in an article that deals with them, and article, whatever it's going to be called, deals with the districts, and it has their form of governments and expenditures and capital budgets and operating budgets, because they develop their own budget. They're not providing their estimates to the city. The city doesn't manage their budgets. The city,
You're talking about
No,
taxing
no,
districts, Steve?
taxing districts, yeah.
No. I don't think that's accurate.
I don't think so either.
No.
It's in the charter now.
Well,
We're not changing that.
it doesn't mean it's accurate, but anyway, I think we need to sort of table this section until we deal with the other section of the definition of the districts.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know what,
Because this is asking for an estimate of what they need.
Right.
And so for the city and the finance department to get an estimate of what everybody's going to need, they need this information. So if you.
but they don't do it. I think what
I would tell you
Henry
right
said,
now,
yeah.
the taxing districts, except for the 6th district, which flows through our tax bills, they don't tell me anything about their budget.
Yeah.
They only come to me when they need to borrow money on bonds.
Yeah, but if you're, wait a minute, if, okay, yeah,
Because they're
If you-
charging,
if-
they're
go ahead.
charging, excuse me,
Yeah.
but they're charging a tax for services that they perform. So it has nothing to do with us in the city.
It's not part of the city's operating budget.
the taxing district, let's take a specific, the 4th taxing district has sewers, but there's a separate sewer charge, right?
And who decides how much that sewer charge is?
Okay, who does? Answer me.
question.
Yeah,
It's the 4th taxing district,
It's
right?
the taxing district.
The taxing is, right?
Okay, and now, do they collect it themselves on their own bill, or did they go through us?
I'm not sure. I thought they
Okay,
went
based
through
on what
you.
I know, they're
Well,
gonna-
if you don't know what it is, if they're not telling you, then you wouldn't be collecting it, right?
Right.
Well,
believe
I
it
mean,
goes to each
Lisa
side.
Biaggiarelli is really good, but I think I've learned enough from her that I don't think we bill for the 4th taxing district's sewer charges. I could be wrong. But the point is, they're providing services and they're charging for it. We're responsible for charging for the services we provide. So the only thing I do is I get a mill rate for the city. And then I say, wait a second, the 4th district doesn't get sewers. Okay? Or whatever, garbage pickup. So therefore, that gets excluded and I change my mill rate for that district. It's all in the purpose of getting the city its net tax levy. which is the amount of revenue we must raise in order to have a balanced budget. So I think I would just ask, it's getting late and we still have a lot to do on the budget. Maybe you
Yeah.
table it when you talk about taxing districts. You
Yeah,
can recall me as a witness. I'll be glad to come back.
Okay, good. I think that's a good idea. That's why I'd mentioned we should table it. Okay,
Your idea, right?
all right, so where are we now?
10-4, review by the Board of Estimates.
Okay,
We're taking taxing districts out of here because they don't have, they're not part of the general operating budget, so that's why they're not included in here.
But it could be re-examined when you do it with the other parts of the
Yeah.
tax district,
mhm.
if you want to.
Power to levy taxes, again, we made the same change of including the mill rate. Shall be laid upon the assessment list of the city last completed. The CFO or other designee of the mayor shall cause the mayor's proposed operating budget, actually got it right there, to be published in accordance with the notice provisions of this charter, at least 5 days before the fourth Monday of February. And then we have definitions that you'll see in Article 1. Any questions on that? We okay with 10-5?
I think so. Nobody's raising a hand. Okay,
And then these are the notice provisions. We'll go over them in more detail. They're going to be in the definitions section. We have definitions for, meeting or hearing notice, and public notice. The major change in public notice was there's no city library, so we call it the public libraries, which we fixed after the last meeting.
okay.
Again, you'll see that in Article 1.
We need to ask corporate council about the two libraries, Rowayton and East Norwalk, if public is the right word, because they're under the districts. You know,
Okay.
they're open to the public, but they're I don't think they're 501c3. Some libraries are. So I would just want to check with them that we have the right terminology. As I mentioned last time, two libraries, that Wall Street and South Norwalk are a city department, and the other two are not. Crazy. Anyway.
very.
In the meeting and hearing, that whole area there, we have a lot of mays that we may publicize rather than shall.
Yep.
And it seemed that it wasn't a lot of required notice to the public. And that's one of the things I think we want to accomplish, is to make the public feel that they're really part of the process. So we look at that and.
All right, why don't we look at it when we start? Why don't we look at this in earnest when we're looking at Article 1, where it's
Yeah.
going to go? So,
Right.
all right.
Okay,
And then there's a redundancy. This last clause should not be in here.
which one is that?
Publication in newspaper general circulation.
Yeah,
is
okay,
Covered under 4, if required by law by publication. We don't want to make it a mandatory function to publish in a newspaper. It's expensive and not necessary, but if it's required by law, or we decide, the town decides that it's an important enough matter, then you'll do it. But I don't want to we don't want to make it mandatory. It's mandatory in a lot of places in the charter right now. And there's fewer and fewer people getting newspapers. And as there's fewer newspapers, it's getting much more expensive. They're taking advantage of these publication laws that make it very, very expensive for municipalities to provide notice. 10.6 is review by the council. Again, the big change here, I put honor before the Tuesday immediately following the fourth Tuesday in February in each year. And it's the mayor's proposed budget.
Which, well, it's budget. So is it operating and capital at that
No,
same?
we're
rate?
in the operating budget section. We haven't
Section.
gone to capital yet.
Okay, so we're gonna have the word operating in front of the word
We
budget.
can do that. We can do that. It's a defined term under the, we'll do that. If you
Okay.
want to do that, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Um, (10-6). Yes. All right. Then, all right, this next paragraph B is going to go away at some point once we finalize the section. I'm sorry. Once we finalize, once we finalize the section, there are several of these exemptions from the referendum provisions. I'm going to just put them up front where we refer to them once and just simply say that setting the cap is exempt from the referendum process and whatever else is as well.
Okay,
So because it's repeated several times, I don't like repetitious provisions as a rule. And then we go to 10-7. It's the Board of Estimate and Taxation deliberations on the mayor's proposed operating budget. Make that change. Again, those are the dates that we talked about the last time. We talked about increases and decreases. People wanted to have decreases in there. And it does say in this case, in the body, mayor's operating budget, proposed operating budget. So we'll make sure it's consistent. 10-8 again talks about alterations, increases, and decreases is the change.
there's an extra of estimate in that, the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Where's that?
In the second line in A.
Right.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go. Well, we want to make sure they really provide a really good estimate. So underscore their role. All right. 10-9.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Denise?
please.
We've left the capital budget and we're in the operating.
We're in the operating.
We haven't gotten
We
to the
haven't
capital
gotten to
budget.
the capital.
We haven't gotten to the capital. So there was a definition of capital
Yeah, early on, which is why it's confused.
early on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is there a definition of operating anywhere?
No, we remember what
In the beginning.
we said at the beginning, we were going to do that
Okay.
Yeah.
right up front. We're going to lay out what the operating budget is and what the capital budget is.
The definition of it, though.
Yes.
Yes.
we're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about. Okay.
Okay, and deliberations of the council. No real changes here. It's 14 days following receipt. Again, one of those exemption provisions is here. And we changed 3 days to 2 days. I think that Henry figured out that 3 days would be on a Sunday.
Okay.
And so we made sure it was 2 days. And then final alterations. Really not a lot of changes in language here. And then here's a section where these actions are subject to referendum provisions. The blank is for what the actual section will be. Then 10-10 deals with some certain standards. Appropriations shall not exceed estimate of revenues, including tax revenues. We again eliminated district from this because Board of Estimate doesn't, and the city doesn't really deal with these types of issues for the taxing districts, I am told. No changes in 10-11. Are these the Henry, this is a section you and I were talking about intra versus interdepartmental transfers and stuff like that.
Where are you now?
10-11.
Well, Steve, you made a distinction between special appropriation
Yeah,
Somebody.
and what was it called, the transfer?
transfers, yeah. I was trying to figure out, and I really couldn't, how you deal with intra versus interdepartmental transfers and where that is governed. And you pointed out to me that the CFO is permitted to allocate contingency funds to any department, and transfers over $5,000 go to BET for approval. And my question was and remains, what's the authority for that? Where does that authority come from?
So let me just give some context. This is the 5,000 I was referring to erroneously before.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
If there's an error by line item within a department, from salaries to overtime, let's say, because they couldn't fill the positions, or even department from department, we call them special appropriations. Steve's term of transfer is probably more technically accurate, where the total amount of appropriations is not changing, but there's a line item control. And the concept in my mind is the council sets the cap, the Board of Estimate during the budget has line item control and can add, subtract, and move it around interdepartmentally. So during the year, if things have to move around, it goes to the BET for their approval. I don't know legally where the authority is, but certainly that's what we do now. The way the word special appropriation is defined or is used in the charter, it sounds like we need more money. It's in excess of the appropriations that were made during the budget year. And we may have to go out and tax citizens to get that money. Right, Steve?
Possibly. Yeah, it's of unappropriated revenues.
We have a requirement to have a balanced budget.
Yep.
So if we have a special appropriation that increases the appropriations, unless we recognize a surplus somewhere else, let's say our revenues exceeded our budget, this is a big deal and it goes to the BET.
And the council.
And
Now, wouldn't it go to the finance committee?
well, anything that goes to the council probably goes to the finance committee before and their
Right.
recommendation, right? Everything goes through committee. But the point is, you're now increasing the appropriations that an 8-month process established. And that's a big deal. So you're going back to the council and the BET to get formal approval. I've never seen it since I've been here.
Yep.
I think.
That very rarely happens. I've seen it when I saw it in New Haven years ago. There was a mid-year appropriation from the General Assembly that provided the city with 3 years of funding for police department, which increased the revenues of the city. So we had to do a special appropriation in the middle of the budget year.
Well, what caused that, Steve?
Crime.
Okay,
There was a lot of crime, and Governor O'Neill at the time was being responsive to all the larger cities. And the legislature might have been a special session, provided these additional appropriations that came in not as grants, but came in as general revenues from the state. And so we had to amend the budget to increase the revenues and then allocate the budget through the lines.
Yeah, I would say recently we got COVID money and ARPA money, but we were able to schedule it during the budget process. So we didn't need a special.
Yeah.
appropriation.
yeah. So should this sort of say something in regards to emergency procedures are needed because of, or? I mean,
These are not emergencies necessarily.
No, but right now it seems pretty wide open. At least to me it does. I could be wrong. I don't want to belabor the point, but
No, they're standard procedures. I was trying to understand how they operate. All communities have special appropriations. Then there is something, which I don't think I've seen here, called emergency procedures, where something is truly an emergency, where certain things need to be reallocated because you're dealing with a tornado or hurricane.
right, that's what I'm referring to.
Pestilence, whatever it may be, the plagues, whatever's happening. And I'll take a look at that, but it's not something I've seen here.
Okay, that's fair.
All right, I have a better understanding. I'll look at those sections again, see if I can try to splice them and dice them so that they're understandable to first to me, and then see if I can make them understandable to everybody else.
Okay,
Okay,
yep.
now, finally, last but not least,
The capital
the
budget.
capital budget. So this is the section that the chair asked me to move to the beginning of the capital budget, fund budget section, which is simply the submission provision. And it's showing up as all new, but as we know, this is what we had last time. I don't think there are any, we've made no changes. And again, I'm going to make the public school change to the Norwalk.
Public school.
Yeah,
Right. I would say that the departments all submit their requests to our database by December 31st. And then either in our December meetings, when we do operating, some departments like to do operating and capital on the same day when they meet with us. If not, then in January, we might have meetings with departments to review their submissions. The Board of Ed, we haven't gotten their submissions yet. They tend to be around January 10th or the 14th in that area. And they give us operating and capital after their Board of Ed approves it.
why can't their Board of Ed approve it in December so they can comply with charter?
Good question.
I think you can ask them.
right. We'll have to have them come before us. Was that?
Yeah,
that-
well, we meet with them, we can ask them.
Yeah.
that.
Is that
Let's
explanation
make a
not made any
note.
sense?
Let's make a note to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think we should probably meet with them sooner than later. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
later in the meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
all right, so that's the submission. Then the CFO,
This is my transmittal letter.
yep,
So one of the major distinctions between the operating budget and the capital budget. In the operating budget right now, the mayor and I collaborate and issue a recommended operating budget. And we're going to call it the mayor's operating budget in the future. On capital, we make separate recommendations. So I come out first with my recommendation through this transmittal letter, January 31st or February 1st. And then it goes through a process, and you'll see that the mayor issues a recommended capital budget later. So just early warning.
Yeah.
then it goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission, where they hold hearings.
So again, I'm going to talk about the length of this whole process.
Yeah,
So we got the recommendations, I'm sorry, the requests from the departments. They're in a database. We review them, and then we sit down with every department, please explain what you're looking for. And again, there's continuity from prior year requests. They may, one time I said, why do you have a $200,000 request? We gave you 200,000 this past year and you didn't spend it. They said, because it cost 400,000 to put a roof and you only gave us half the money. So until we get the other half, we can't put the roof on. So there's continuity from year to year, department to department, what they're trying to do. There's also some linkages between capital budget requests and operating budget. So for example, we had a situation last year where a department wanted two new people, right? There was requisition, and they wanted a new truck. And this was to put traffic signs up all over the city. The mayor was against hiring the two people. And they said, if you don't give us the people, we don't need the truck. Why do you need a truck? Because every time they asked DPW to use their truck, it was at the last second and it was already scheduled for other use. So I'm just pointing out, sometimes there are linkages all over the place.
Yeah.
The reason I raise this is, so the departments have sat down to go over their operating budget with us. They then sit down with the capital budget. Then they sit down with planning and zoning to go over their capital budget. Okay? That's why it takes a lot of time to get through this.
So as you'd mentioned earlier with the operating, you're now looking at actuals against what's being requested for capital as well?
No, with capital,
Actual.
capital is a one shot. It's either approved or not approved. We do look at, we have our first meeting with the mayor next week. And when we look at capital budgets, we look at every capital project has a number when it's
Right.
approved, okay? And we accumulate the amount of dollars spent in that project. And our computer systems are set up that they're only approved up to the limit of what was approved. But what's interesting is that left-hand extreme column says, what's the balance in that project as of, let's say, December 31st, when we prepare the data to sit with the mayor and then go to everyone else. Sometimes they'll say, we're spending it in the spring. Don't worry, it's going to be gone. And we're going to need more money next year. Sometimes it's been rolling over for a while. So we do use actual expenditures as a factor when we're evaluating capital project requests.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering. I figured you probably did. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay,
So we eliminated the master plan, which doesn't really exist. Replaced it with the current statutory plan for of conservation and development. Other information is requested, staff assistance. Mainly, we replaced the controller, which is in the current charter, with the CFO as the player, as a significant executive involved in the development of this budget. Then the mayor reviews the proposed plan together with the report of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And
Well, it's really,
I'm sorry, the plan, the program is submitted to the mayor. Yeah,
what happens is
yeah.
the department's request, my team reviews it. And so it's like a CFO recommendation.
Yep.
And then planning and zoning reviews it, and then they have a recommendation. And then the mayor takes that all into consideration to come out with his recommendation.
Gotcha.
And that's what gets sent to the BET, and it's the reverse of operating. BET sets a cap, and the council can juggle line items in different projects, I believe.
Where do they set the cap? That's,
This is my understanding of what the role is of the BET.
no, I understand, but I'm just trying to see in here where that occurs. The
It should be 1060.
which shall approve the budget incorporating the recommendations, but it doesn't say anything about a cap. It doesn't say anything about maximum Like in the operating side, it's a maximum amount, a maximum expenditure, but
Well, go back, Steve, you put it into 1017. I should say go ahead. Actions of the Common Council. Upon receipt of the recommendations of the BET,
or reduce any item.
may approve, reject, or reduce.
Yeah, I didn't change it. That's the language. Okay, that's it. That's
It's
where it
sort of
says it.
hidden. It's not really explicit.
No,
So-
that's where it says it. You're right. I see it.
But the point is, might it not be made a little bit more clear in B where the BET is going to the Common Council? It's just a suggestion. It's up to you.
No, I got
In
it.
other words, to say that and it's sent to the Common Council for their review and action or whatever. Is that what you're saying, Henry?
Well, what I'm saying is, if you look at the words closely that Steve put in there,
Yeah.
the council can approve, reject, or reduce, but
Right,
not increase.
right.
Yeah, that's in the current ordinance. Yeah.
It's
The,
in effect, it's a
yeah.
cap that was established by the BET.
Yeah, we don't make it as explicit as I said a moment ago in 10-16 for the actions by BET, that what they're doing is setting a maximum.
They're also in contrast, in the operating, the council sets the cap, it goes to BET, but BET may request, go back to the council and say, we want you to increase the cap. And with a 2/3 vote, they can. Here,
You'll get resistance. It's one thing to have the cap. I think that the Common Council views the capital budget as their baby. I don't think they're going to want to go back. I think when they have already approved the concept, is I didn't write this approve, reject, or reduce is in the ordinance.
the ordinance or the charter?
No, it's not in the charter. This is the capital budget's not in the charter right now. We're putting it in the charter. And I used as a template their current ordinance.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And so one of the points I want to make clear to everybody, when I spoke to the Common Council early in this process, they said, don't take anything away from us. So if we say that but right now, there's no reason to go back to BET because they can only approve, reject, or reduce. So they're not increasing. There's no need to go back to BET because they can't increase.
So you'd rather just keep the language as is without lagging it.
Yeah.
I hear you.
So Steve, quick question in A where it says about the vote, it says vote of the majority of its members. Is it a simple majority or is it a 2/3 majority?
If it says a majority, it means a simple majority.
Okay.
And let me tell you something, Carl. One of the conversations I had with Tom Livingston, one of the things we're going to do is go through the document. And I usually like to define the term majority vote of the Common Council. And usually a majority vote of the Common Council, you can do it one of two ways, either a majority of those present and voting or a majority of the entire body. We're going to come up with one that is kind of the common definition. So when you see majority vote of the Common Council, that will be what it means. If it's going to mean anything else, it needs to be explicit in that place. So that if you wanted to have a 2/3 vote, it should say 2/3 vote, because if it simply says majority of the Common Council, you're going to have to go back to the definition and say, what does that mean? And people hopefully will know what that means. So
Right.
we're going to try to do that. So I haven't changed any of those things here. At some point, we're going to go through the document and look at every place where majority is used and try to come up with a common definition. And then also try to decide what kind of votes. And there are things in the charter already that require a 2/3 vote. So we will go through that process.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. And again, I think it's terrific. I've praised, this is a Tom Livingston provision. I've actually been putting into charters in the budget section an explanation of how their budgets are consistent with the plan of conservation and development, because the state mandates this. If you don't do it every 10 years, you could be placed in jeopardy for future state funding. And at some point, I think it's possible if the state actually gets their act together, that they may take a look and say, okay, we see your plan. Thank God you've approved it every 10 years, but what are you doing to implement it? How does your budget implement the plan, both on the capital side and on the, it's more on the capital side, but also on the general fund side. So this is a very innovative provision. And Carl, as you can see in C, there is a 2/3 vote of the entire Common Council. Again, I will make sure that there's consistent language, either, of the entire Common Council or the Common Council present and voting, whatever the standard is we want. In this case, it's entire.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
Then I believe that Henry and I had a discussion about all of this stuff. And I think this is up in the air, Henry. I think Tom's looking at it. Going to be talking to the mayor's office and probably, and he specifically mentioned you, poor Henry.
Are you talking 10?
10-18
Okay,
on,
Letter A is not a problem, and we do that. We publish
yeah,
the capital budget, so everybody knows and is informed. Letter B, to the best of my knowledge, is not done.
that's, yeah, I mentioned to him that you and I had that conversation. And so that needs policymakers to have a discussion, and the allotment section as well.
Monthly reports for a 7-year, building of the Norwalk High School, to my mind, is overkill. It just causes people to write reports, and the reports will sit on people's desks. You want to get accountability, you have to make it more specific. It might be certain projects, not others. Who's the person who's getting the reports and reviewing them? So yeah, it has to be rethought.
Yeah, so this section needs to be looked at a little bit more to make sure you don't, what I try to do, Madam Chair, members of the commission, in areas that are kind of dormant, where the charter has not been followed. This case, it's not the charter, it's an ordinance that was adopted not too long ago, frankly. I want to try to reverse engineer the legislation into practices that can be followed and will be followed, and not put something in here that no one's looking at now and is going to have to figure out when they see it in their constitution. So this is the time for us to fix this.
so you're saying 1018B is in ordinance, not in the existing charter?
The entire capital budget section is
Oh,
in an
okay,
ordinance,
right.
the whole thing.
That's what I was gonna
Yeah,
ask.
right.
Yeah,
I
the whole
forgot.
thing.
Yeah, obviously.
And then if it's put into this document, it stays an ordinance. But how do you know, how do people know? How would I know whether it's an ordinance or part of the
Well,
charter?
what they should do if this charter passes is there going to be things that are inconsistent between the charter and their ordinance. They should repeal their ordinance.
Ordinance, yeah.
If
And would
everything
we-
works the way it
would we
should.
Give them a list of what would be necessary to repeal
Yeah, we can do
part
that.
of our project?
We
Yeah.
can do that if it
Okay.
passes. Yeah.
Okay,
But they clearly should repeal their ordinance or adopt things that we don't address. But their ordinance would change very substantially.
I would just add the importance of this review. I was CFO of Wayne County, the largest county in Michigan. And they borrowed $200 million to build a new jail. And after 2 years of construction, they had spent $150 million and said, oops, we need 300 million, not 200 million. And the county commission said no. So now you had the worst of all worlds. You had 300 million and 200 million in bonds that had to be paid off. You had an old jail where inmates were that are still in an old jail, and the property where they were building a new jail is worth less than raw land because you have a half-constructed jail. People ended up going to jail because of problems with the way the project was managed. Okay, so maybe
Which
Presumably
jail
they
did they go
went,
to?
presumably went to the old jail.
well, the
Or
point
they
is
were in charge of
that
building a new one.
you have to monitor, but it might be based on size and what's the frequency of the monitoring and who's doing the monitoring, but I'll leave that to others. But
I will talk to Tom and make sure that between now and the next meeting, we sit down with you and just really go through this and get this right, get this done.
right,
All right. So let's go, and that'll include the discussion on allotments
Yeah.
and restrictions. I think we were okay on. If I'm not mistaken, Henry, were we all right in this section? We made the one change.
restrictions. I'm trying to refresh my memory.
Yeah.
What's a restriction?
No obligation shall be authorized or expenditures made in any fiscal year or for or on any account or on account of a capital budget unless such obligations or expenditures shall have been included in the capital budget.
Well,
fine.
it should be
Yeah.
final approved for that fiscal year or a prior year.
Mhm.
That was your request. I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
it.
Do we have that in there?
Mm-hmm.
it's in there. Yeah, the prior year's in there.
Okay, you're in 1019?
1019.
Okay, as long as it's in there.
It's the third line down, prior is the last word in the third
that-
line down.
And then 1020 is the first mention I've seen in the charter. They use the word economical. I'm not sure that's a word, but that's okay. Economic measures, but whatever. Its request for additional obligations to the capital budget shall not be approved unless the request is made necessary by unforeseeable or emergency conditions. So here's to Carl's point earlier, this is an emergency provision. Can we just take a look at this and make sure it makes sense? Henry,
I'm going through this right now.
Yeah.
With the fire department and the apparatus. We approved the apparatus. They opened up the bids and the bids are much higher than what was estimated. So now we're rushing to go through the process, going to the BET, then the finance committee, then the council, or maybe, yeah, I think those are the committees, to get an additional approval for the capital budget because there's a certain deadline and then the prices are going to go up even more. So we're living it right now. I haven't done it before, but my question is, where's the money coming from? And if they have other capital projects which are completed, but the budget is still there, they should close it out and free up those dollars. If not, it falls under this category of we need emergency additional money.
all right.
Now, do we have a rainy day fund?
Mhm.
Well, but how do we access the rainy day fund? Don't we need approvals from all those parties?
You don't know
Yeah.
what's down there.
So it's a
No.
question.
Yeah, but you said where would it come from? So
No, I'm talking about when the department comes in and asks for more money.
yeah,
We have annually, we have a contingency fund. And the rainy day fund is usually just allocated once a year during the budget.
Okay. Again, we'll look at that. I'll try to break that down a little bit more. Because I don't know what the history of this was. This was
Yeah.
this ordinance was adopted in 1961 and amended in 2021.
Let me go back to 1021, financing recommendations.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
This is like the missing link, Patsy, I mentioned to you before, between the capital budget for
mhm.
the coming year that's approved and how we're gonna finance it. And I've decoupled that. And I have no problem issuing a memorandum that says, here's what this year's annual borrowing is gonna be, and here's the old stuff that we have to borrow for, the new stuff, it's based on cash flow projections. So this is a little bit narrower under the old assumption that what we approve in one year gets bonded that year and gets spent that year.
And is May 1st a date that you ever follow? Is that a date that's significant?
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Same, the paragraph you're reading from 10-21. On or before the first day of May.
Oh, that would be, I almost would do it separately from the budget process. Because
You raised that with me. That's why I'm asking the question.
no, I mean, we need a couple of weeks off to just catch our breath. During which time I'm talking to our financial advisor, I'm talking to the investment banks, we're looking at the markets. we already have the cash flow assumptions.
So
But,
June 1st, June 15th.
well, it has to be after the capital budget is approved. Because we have cash flow projections for the old projects that were approved. We don't know what those cash flow projections are gonna be until we decide what we're going to approve. So if May 1st, we approve the current year's capital budget,
Well, the capital budget's approved on or before the 15th of April, according to this document.
okay, fine. So on April 15th, and give us a week or two, we have to go out to the department heads again and say, these projects just got approved. Give us a rolling 2-year forecast of the cash flows. So last
So-
year, was 39 million, and they were going to spend about 16 million in the current year. We had
Just-
to add that to the prior cash flows to determine our financing strategy.
So would a month be enough as opposed to 2 weeks? Like,
Um,
What if you just made it June 1st?
or
Well,
make it June
I would
1st?
say I'd like to have June 1st.
Fine.
I can do it as fast as I can, but the markets were very choppy last summer. And
Then we'll do
rates
June
were going
1st.
crazy. I say June 1st probably be much better.
All right.
And that's okay with the budget ending the end of June? The whole cycle?
yeah,
Well, the capital
This is the
budget.
capital. This is not the fiscal year.
Okay, all right, yeah, just,
but that
Okay.
gives you enough to do the bonding in June so that
No,
at the
no.
commencing of the new fiscal year, you would have the money available?
No, we
No.
always bond in the summer, July and August usually.
Mhm, yeah,
There are market dynamics. There are many bonds that come due and mature June 30. And then they want to get reinvested, so it helps the supply demand balance. We get better rates. And we're positioned better. It's worked for us for years. Our financial advisor has been advising the city for about 20 years. And he's one of the leading advisors throughout Connecticut. So again, we're issuing Connecticut tax-free paper. There's a limited demand, and we want to make sure we hit the market right.
right.
So we normally have unexpended bond proceeds that we have left over June 30th, July 1st. So we are covered based on the fact that most of the construction will be done through, let's say, October. And then over the summer, we'll replenish with the new amounts that we're looking for.
okay.
10-22 is simply a provision that requires public participation in the hearings conducted by the P and Z and Common Council, not BET. Does BET traditionally not have public hearings?
They do it on the operating side. I don't know about the capital.
I'm pretty sure they do.
Should we throw BET in here then?
Well, we should check it out.
I don't,
All right.
I know that the BET, I just can't comment off the top of my head on the
All
capital.
right.
I think you're right, Henry. They do on operating. I don't know that they do on cap.
No, I have a lot of compassion. These are all volunteers like you people. And they have how many meetings once a month?
Mhm.
And then when they have all these hearings, we have meetings like 3 or 4 nights a week for a couple of weeks. And I wouldn't want to put on a burden of the capital if it's not already there.
Right.
It's the glory and the burden.
Yeah.
All right, so that's 10-22. Then we made this change here where we eliminated, there was a very detailed provision on the oversight of city capital building projects and basically distilled it down to one paragraph that says the Common Council shall enact an ordinance pertaining to the implementation and oversight of city, I think city capital projects. Let's see where it ends. City.
Maybe you can link it to that other one that we were going to look at.
City capital building projects. Yeah, we will. But we stripped this down because this was far too codified, and a lot of this may be better placed in an ordinance. But we'll look at it in the context of the other one you and I are looking at.
And maybe different projects go through different committees.
Yep.
So if it's a construction project, let's say for the schools, it goes to land use. If it's a sewer or a bridge, maybe it goes to the Public Works Committee, but you could do all that in ordinances. And
They can do that in ordinance or in their rules. I wasn't happy with the idea that they were laid out in the charter because they may change their committee structure and they shouldn't be mandated by the
And
charter.
we have over the years, you know, we've gone
Yeah.
from parks and recs to recs and parks and planning and zoning separate and then planning and zoning combined and, yeah.
And the last item, which we talked about last time, and we made one minor change based on, I'm just putting on its own page. There it goes. Borrowing.
Yeah.
This is the section that that was prepared by bond counsel. And I thought we made a change in here.
I thought this is the one where it just codifies what we do currently.
Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
The
This
mayor's
was drafted by bond counsel
and
to
control.
replace the 3 paragraphs that were in the current charter.
Okay,
All right,
let the record note.
that's it.
An ordinance employee, not part of a union, and I get no overtime. for this union.
Let the record show, Henry, that many of us on here probably have 1,000 hours of overtime too.
Sei gesund. Enjoy yourself.
You signed up for this.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Okay, anyway.
Thank you, Henry.
Thanks,
Glad
Henry.
to help.
Henry, thank
Anything
you.
need, Just give me a holler. I'm gonna drop off now. Thanks.
Okay,
Take
all
care.
right,
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
yeah, okay, so what do we do from here?
Well,
You're gonna redo this again.
yeah, I'll update this. I think, do you want to invite the education people to come to our next session?
I think sooner than later, yes.
Yeah. All right,
You know, I think we need to have our document before we meet with them so that we aren't discussing what, you know, did we make this clear or not?
all
you
right, so
know?
why don't we do one more session on the document and then we can.
And
go
then
from
we
there.
can work on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because otherwise we can look like we're not ready to talk to them.
Yeah, so maybe we'll aim for February 1st for the Board of Ed.
Yeah,
Okay, so I will update the document. I'll turn it around. There will be changes based on some of the things we talked about. Livingston, Thomas talked about, and Greg talking to the mayor, talking to Henry to take a look at some of the issues that we still have questions on. I'll make the simple changes that we talked about tonight, making sure that we emphasize the operating budget. I'll take another look at plain language. Every time I look at it, I'm going to try to make it plainer and more direct. And I'll try to get that out to everybody by the beginning of next week, way in advance of the meeting, so you see that. But that won't include any changes that are substantive recommendations that we'll be discussing, because I doubt we'll get to it till next week sometime. Is that okay?
I don't understand what the last part of what you said.
We're going to have further meetings
Yeah, next
with
meeting.
Henry and with the administration
Oh,
to
yeah,
discuss
okay.
the capital
Okay.
budget sections.
and then you'll do it and then get it.
Yeah.
to us. Okay,
If you want, I'll give you an interim markup of the things that are editorial cleanups. So you'll see those included. I'll do that tomorrow and get that out so that everybody sees those changes. And I will note what is outstanding and what we will be talking to third parties about.
well, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
That will be helpful.
All right.
Yeah,
So I'll have that to you as soon as possible.
okay,
All right.
yes. And then-
Now, do you want to?
now- Go ahead.
So let me explain article, should I go on? Somehow we have item Roman numeral 4 and item Roman numeral 6, so Roman numeral 5 dropped off. So this is articles 1 through 3. And I sent out to you today kind of it's not a red line because it's all new, that gives you a sense of where I want to go with, where I'm going to be recommending we go with Article 1 and Article 2. They're pretty much there in its entirety, and I'll be happy to walk you through that quickly. Article 3, which I was hoping to get done for today, I ended up with an emergency from another client. It still needs a lot of work, but it's a little more profound. One of the things I'm working with the Corporation Council on right now is trying to figure out how you do reapportionment in in Norwalk. It's not clear how that is done. It's not in the ordinances and it's not in the charter. And it's something that needs to be done according to the US Supreme Court every 10 years. So that's why I was not able to complete Article 3. I hope to have that done before the end of the week in a draft form, leaving a few gaps for things like reapportionment, which are not clear. But if you want, I can, how's everybody feeling? You want to do, you want me to try to do the 8-minute version to get you out of here by 9, or what do you want me to do?
I'm done.
Or do you want to have a chance to review it and I'll,
Yeah, I think people are done.
Yeah.
And-
Focus on this after,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
cleaning up the 10, right?
right. And then we go to the
all right,
next.
I will get you a complete 1, 2, 3 with all the data, hopefully in the next few days. I hope to have it for you today so that for the next meeting, we will be able to look at that. I hope to have more complete information on reapportionment, reevaluation, on the districts. I'm trying to, in the current charter, you have 3 different concepts. There's council districts, there's wards, and there's precincts. And I want to figure out how those interact.
Good luck.
Good luck with that one.
Well,
I got it.
and well, then maybe I'll talk to the town clerk. Where is he? Is he going? Is the town clerk going?
Yeah.
I think I called him today about this, actually.
Did you call the town clerk today about that?
I think I did. I
He
think
was
I
out
did.
to lunch.
I was sitting
Yeah.
with the governor.
Oh, I forgot he was up there. I thought he was busy reading my article in Connecticut Magazine.
No, I wanted to get autographed.
All right, I'll take care of that for you. Don't worry.
Thanks.
Steve,
Tyler will take care of it.
With these iterations of different sections, can you number them for us at the top, like, draft 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever? Because
I will.
yeah, because trying to keep them straight of where we are. What's the last one? Is little.
I usually have them dated on the inside here, but I'll come up with a consistent framework.
Something up at
for you.
top, on the top, please.
I'll do that.
Bottom. Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Okay,
So next meeting, we'll discuss budget again, and
right.
we'll have a more fulsome discussion of Articles 1, 2, and 3.
And then the next one will.
Try to do the
invite
Board of Ed after
Board
that.
of Ed.
Sort that out.
Right.
All right. All
Good.
right, everybody.
All right.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year. Thank you, everybody.
Motion
Hang on a
to
second.
adjourn.
Before we adjourn, I just have
Hold on,
one
Carl.
Wait a
question.
minute, Carl.
Carl,
Carl?
Carl,
I was just gonna say, before we adjourn, I have one question, maybe a totally stupid question. Some are.
no,
But as I look back over the charter and I looked at the previous charter, I looked at this, and then we talk about all these taxing districts and all these other districts and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and all that, which seems to be very convoluted. Is there in the charter anywhere a definition of what the mayor really does? And what the
Yeah.
mayor really governs?
Yeah.
yeah,
There is?
We'll look at those. I mean, when we finish, look, when we get through 1, 2, 3, and 10,
Yes,
10's a big one. And we get through 1, 2, and 3, you're at that point, you've dealt with particularly 3, the elections process, who the elected officials are, et cetera. We then go to the council and the mayor.
okay,
And you will see that the mayor and the council have pages and pages and pages of responsibilities. The mayor can handle it much more poignantly and wittily than I can. There's some really interesting powers that he has,
very much.
especially dealing with dens of inequity in Norwalk, and that he has access to as mayor. But the fact is, they're massive roles. And what I'm going to be recommending, they were placed in the charter at a time where that's the only way we knew what a mayor could do. And it was only the state that could lay out those specifics. With the Home Rule Act, it gives us the ability to lay out general powers, that the mayor is the chief executive official, that the mayor proposes budget, that the mayor appoints officials, that the mayor does this. The council, and the same thing with the council has the ability through ordinance to put meat on the bones and operate within the Home Rule Act. We don't need to delineate
Mhm.
the mayor is responsible for administering pig pens and supervising the pig pens of the city of Norwalk. I'm not sure that's yours. I think that may be Branford.
No, ours are cows on the street.
Cows on the street.
Cows
yeah.
on the street.
Cows
Yeah.
on the street.
And, you know, in Branford, it's pig pens. And so everybody has a unique thing that they're responsible for from their old special acts. You don't need to delineate cows on the street in 2023. And so, yeah, Carl, the charter is far too many pages on it. And so my hope is when you see the 3 chapters that I've, or at least the 2 and then the partial 3, you're going to see what I've done. And at some point, I'll show you a red line of what I've eliminated. You'll see at the back of the document provisions that I think should be eliminated. Before I do strongly recommend elimination, I will go over it with the Corporation Council. I want to make sure that the city's chief legal operator does not have any reason to believe that something should remain in there. If there's a case going on that I'm not aware of, or he knew 10 years ago, we used this provision 5 years ago, whatever it may be, then we may have to keep an ancient provision. But you'll see the beginning of the methodology in chapter articles 1, 2, and 3. You'll see at the back of the document things I'm recommending that we take out. When we get to the mayor's section, you'll see, something that thick that we're going to try to cut out. And we're going to try to keep it very narrow. I want to try to keep the mayor's section down to 3 to 5 pages. Right now, it's probably 20 pages. And there's just too much. Members of the public can't possibly figure out what the mayor does by having to read 25 pages of biblical interpretations, basically.
I would agree.
Right?
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, can I make a motion? We adjourn.
Yes, yes, May.
No.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
We
See you
are
later,
so
everybody.
adjourned. Thank you, everybody.